Haunted Beard's top 10 list of best found footage movies. If you're watching this, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Haunted Beard. My name is Jake. Well, it turns out I'm not the only one here who is a bit of a sucker for found footage movies. I got a few comments from a couple of you guys that said you'd be interested in seeing a video on some of my favorite found footage movies. So here we are. Quick shout out though to Ivan Worley. Ivan, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. And also shout out to Artemis Nectar 7. You guys both said you'd be interested in a found footage video talking about some of my favorites. So you are my inspiration for this video. I want to make sure I'm getting videos to you guys that you're interested in. So here you go. Here are my top 10 found footage movies. Let's do it. Now, before I kick off the list, though, I do have one honorable mention I have to give you. And the reason why I wanted to put this in here is because this movie isn't maybe technically a found footage, at least sort of in the traditional understanding of that word, but it does still contain some found footage elements. And that movie is Resolution. It was directed by Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, who are, I think, some of the most exciting, kind of young, up-and-coming directors working in horror right now. Resolution tells the story of a guy who imprisons his addict junkie friend in this isolated cabin in the middle of nowhere to try to help him get clean. And once they are both there, I'll just say strange and weird things start happening. And this is a good one that is best to go in knowing as little about it as possible. I'm not going to give you any more information than what I just gave you. This is another one too that I think may take a couple viewings to kind of fully get and understand what the filmmakers are going for. But man, this is a really solid film. Now, this is a low budget movie. The budget is listed at $20,000, but this is a great example of how you don't need the millions and millions of dollars and all that extra stuff to make a good movie. If you just have a good idea and a good script and a good director or directors to execute that idea, that's all you need. And this is a great example of that. I would definitely recommend you check out Resolution. As of the recording of this video, you can watch it for free right now on Freevee, and also I found the full movie uploaded on YouTube as well. So check this thing out, it's really good. Okay, now let's kick off the official list. Here we go. Starting off at number 10 is a new release that I just recently talked about. I'm going to go with Incantation at number 10. This is a new Netflix original movie that just dropped a few weeks ago from Taiwan, and I reviewed it on my channel. So if you want some more in-depth thoughts, check that review out. Overall, had a pretty solid time with this one. It's got a handful of pretty memorable and effective and disturbing sequences that really stuck out for me. But also, too, the movie kind of subverted my expectations in that it doesn't just hit you with the horror and the thrills, but there's also a dramatic relationship type element to this, as it's really a story about a mother's love for her daughter. And so there's kind of some, I think, pretty significant emotional, dramatic weight to it as well. And I think they do a good job just with that whole connection and that relationship there, and the performances there are pretty solid as well. So Incantation starts off at number 10. Next up at number 9 is VHS 2, the found footage anthology horror film. And this has 4 segments in it. One of them is not very good, 2 of them are pretty solid, and then the 4th one is absolutely excellent, and that is Safe Haven. And that segment alone earns this film its spot at number 9 on my list. Now, I've also reviewed VHS 2 on my channel already as well. If you want some more in-depth thoughts, check that video out. But Safe Haven is my favorite segment out of all 4 VHS films. This thing is absolutely terrific. It starts off nice and slow, kind of gets you that slow burn, and then the last half of it is absolute white-knuckle insanity. Just some intense, crazy, disturbing, messed up stuff happens. It is a wild ride, and I absolutely love it. It's got just some great sort of production value. The lead performance from the main kind of cult leader guy is really memorable. It's got particularly a good jump scare. It's got some nice practical effects, and the final image is just great and something I will not soon forget. Safe Haven, in terms of a found footage short, I think is about as good as you can do. So that is number 9, VHS 2. Coming in at number 8 is what I think is probably fair to say at this point, the classic Paranormal Activity. And this is a fun one for me because I actually remember seeing this in theaters when it came out. And I can remember I seen it with a couple buddies of mine, and one of them was not particularly a fan of horror movies. And I just remember looking over at him a couple times during the movie and him just being all crunched down like this with his hat, barely covering over his eyes, and just smiling. And just a memorable moment at the movie theaters. For people in my age range, I think that this is kind of our generation's Blair Witch Project. And this movie, I think, is mostly responsible for kind of mainstreaming and just starting the avalanche of found footage films that we got after this thing came out. Part of what I like in general about found footage movies is that the vast majority of them are significantly low budget. And it's just always interesting to see, with those limitations and restrictions, how creative can people be. I think those limitations breed creativity. And if memory serves, I think the budget on this was like $9,000 or $10,000, which is just crazy. And it's just cool to see how people are able to be ambitious and creative given those limitations. And Paranormal Activity is just a great example of that. And the last 5 to 10 minutes of this movie are just great and memorable, and I think one of the best found footage endings of all time. If by some crazy chance you haven't seen this thing yet, what are you doing? Go out and watch it. Okay, coming in at number 7 is Butterfly Kisses. And this is an interesting one. It's about this filmmaker who finds this box of mini DV tapes. And on these tapes is this film project from these 2 students as they're making this project for school about this local legend called the Peeping Tom. And the filmmaker ends up trying to put together a film out of their footage to prove whether or not this legend is actually real or fake. And as I said, this is an interesting one because this film is a found footage mockumentary, but it's a found footage mockumentary about a found footage mockumentary. It's like a film within a film. And so it just kind of has that layer to it that really makes it for an intriguing watch. It also has some interesting just kind of commentary on found footage films in general. And I've just found myself really getting kind of wrapped up in the mystery of it all. And it does a really good job of kind of pulling you in and getting you to kind of look at both sides as this filmmaker is trying to prove this story to be true, but is met with all sorts of skepticism and criticism and things like that. And it does a good job of just sort of presenting that real versus fake, as we can understand why the filmmaker thinks that it's real, but we also understand why people are so critical and skeptical of it. And so I just kind of like that whole real versus fake aspect. And just the story and the mystery of it is really interesting. You can also watch this one for free right now on Freevee. So check this thing out. It's really good. Next up at number 6 is Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. And this is a cool one because not only is this a found footage movie, but it is also a slasher movie. And so if you like slasher or found footage or both, you can't go wrong with Behind the Mask. And this one has a really cool concept because it is set in a world where the horror icons of Freddy, Michael, and Jason are actual real people. And being a slasher killer is a real occupation. And so this movie follows this documentary crew as they are making a documentary about Leslie Vernon, who wants to be the next horror slasher icon. And the execution of this is pretty solid. And I feel like this one for a while was a bit of a underrated hidden gem, but is starting to gain some popularity. And so you get some good found footage vibes, you get some good slasher vibes. And it's also cool because it provides a bit of a twist on the slasher film in that this is told from the killer's perspective as he is hunting down his victims and everything like that. And so it's just kind of a unique twist on it. You got the nice combination of found footage and slasher. So definitely check out Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. All right, so we've hit the top 5, and to be honest with you, this top 5 was really hard to rank, and I think on any given day, probably any one of these 5 movies could probably be in that number 1 spot. If you were to ask me tomorrow what my favorite was, it might be something different, but as of today, these are my top 5, and here's the ranking. So, number 5 is VHS 94, and I have also reviewed this film on my channel already, so you can check that out for some more in-depth thoughts. But VHS 94 is my favorite installment in the VHS series, and I think just overall it is the best one. It is the most consistent. There is not a bad segment in the bunch. There are 2 segments in particular that I think are really pretty great. In fact, they are the first 2, the storm drain and the empty wake. These are my second and third favorite segments out of the entire VHS series. The storm drain is just awesome. It's got just this local legend aspect to it. It's got some cool practical effects in it. It's got just some creepy moments going up into a tunnel. It's got this weird sort of thing where it's editing in this infomercial type deal that just adds this kind of strange aspect to it. Definitely some disturbing moments, some good suspense, good practical effects, and a really solid ending as well. And then the empty wake is just, I really love just the simplicity of it, how it's just this girl who is at this funeral home in charge of a wake, and the body in the casket may not be dead. And I just like the simplicity of it. It's this dark, stormy night. We get just these wide static angles that just kind of make things feel more real and authentic, and it's just really effective and really well done. So that is my number 5, VHS 94. Coming in at number 4 is Creep, and Creep is a really solid one. This tells the story of this videographer who answers this online ad to go and record the last messages of this man who is dying. And so he agrees to do it and goes out there, and he is in kind of this remote, isolated cabin. And the highlight in this one for me is the performance by Mark Duplass, who is also responsible for co-writing the script. But man, his performance is great. I think it's one of the better performances I have seen in any found footage movie. His character is just extremely well written and very well performed, and just the whole thing has just this kind of overall feeling of eeriness, and it's very unsettling. And this guy, you can't really get a good read on him, and he comes across as a little weird, but at the same time he's just kind of funny and quirky, and his performance is just really good, selling all those different vibes that you get from the guy. And this one also too has, I'll just say, a kill in it that is very disturbing and very memorable. And if for nothing else, watch this thing for Mark Duplass's performance, because his performance is really solid. And if you're in the mood for something that is just eerie and creepy and off-putting, you can't go wrong with Creep. It is in my list at number 4. Okay, coming in at number 3 is Searching. And this one is maybe a little bit of a different kind of found footage style in the fact that the entire thing takes place on a computer screen, as this father's daughter goes missing, and he is doing his best to try to figure out what happened to her and where she is by going back and looking through her computer. And this is just a really well-told story and well-told mystery. The lead performance by John Cho is really good. And this one, too, also has a really strong kind of dramatic emotional aspect, as it's about a father's love for his daughter. And you just really feel that. It really comes through just even by looking at nothing else other than a computer screen. And it's just got some really good suspense. It's got some nice twists and turns. And the mystery just had me hooked right from the get-go. It kept me guessing all the way throughout up until the very end. And I just really like the presentation and what they were able to accomplish, and how effectively they were able to tell the story and the mystery just simply through a laptop screen. Thought it was just really well done. So that comes in at number 3, Searching. Next up at number 2 is Hell House LLC. And Hell House LLC follows this documentary crew who go to investigate this horrific event that occurred at this haunted house on Halloween night 5 years previous. And this one is really good. The opening particularly is really good and scary and really kind of sets off the mystery of what exactly is going on. We sort of see part of the events from what occurred that night, but we don't really get a full picture of it. And so we're kind of start off very mysterious and intrigued, and then we follow the documentary crew as they're going back to this haunted house to investigate to see what is going on, and they set up their own haunted house. And this movie has a few scenes that had me, and I think you know what I mean when I say that. When a movie has you and you're just dialed in and you're feeling the tension, you're feeling the scares, you're feeling the suspense, this movie has a few of those moments where it has you. Hell House LLC is just really effective, and it's scary, and it's just a really good story, and I like the haunted house aspect to it, and just overall had a really good time with this one. If you have not seen it, it is available right now on Amazon Prime. Obviously, I would highly recommend you check this out. That's my number 2, Hell House LLC. Okay, we have reached number 1, and my number 1 favorite found footage movie, and remember, if you were to ask me tomorrow, it might be something different. But as of today, my number 1 favorite found footage is As Above, So Below. And man, this thing is pretty great. I think the best aspect of this thing is its setting. And this actually takes place, the filmmakers were actually given access and allowed to film in the underground catacombs in Paris, France. And man, if that doesn't sell you, I don't know what will. Where there is literally thousands and thousands of dead bodies and now just bones that are underneath the streets in Paris, France, and they got to film this thing down there. And man, it makes for one heck of a great found footage movie. And this one, the story is pretty straightforward, as it's just about this group of explorers who go down in the catacombs to explore and investigate. And this one, though, just has some really effective and intense sequences. There is a real strong claustrophobia type vibe to it that is really effective. Just has some real solid in-camera effects that are really well done. It's got kind of a cool sort of connection in a way to Dante's Inferno and the Nine Circles of Hell, and there's kind of some comparisons and connections you can draw between this movie and that story, which kind of add an interesting layer of depth to it as well. And I just have a lot of fun with this one. I obviously highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. But as of today, that sits at number 1 on my favorite found footage movies, As Above, So Below. Well, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Hit me up down in the comments below, though. I would love to hear from you. What are some of your favorites? Also, I haven't seen every found footage, so I'm always looking for new ones to watch and more recommendations. And if you like this thing enough, I'm sure I could probably bring you another top 10 of my favorite found footage as well. So, would love to hear from you. Hit me up down below. Once again, thank you so much for watching. We will see you next time on The Haunted Beard.